Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel or backing me on Patreon and subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week. Big shout out to the Goblin Punch blog of Arnold Kemp, who created the False Hydra as a homebrew creature for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in an article he posted on Thursday, September 4th, 2014. There is a link to the original article in the description below this video. Arnold is still going strong and has a Patreon if you like their stuff and wish to support them. This creature proved to be very popular, and the most frequently viewed version on D&D Beyond was posted in the Monster Homebrew listings by Oates1321 on the 23rd of December 2017. Since then, it has had an astounding 47,464 views as I record this video, with no less than 77 upvotes by the community. So well done, Oates. So, what is the False Hydra? What indeed? Where did it come from? A rain-soaked cobble and mud street, worn thin by hundreds of years of feet, wagons, carts and animals. The bustling population of the town of Luskan on the Sword Coast. Luskan has a well-deserved reputation as being a harsh and sordid town. The rulership is selfish, and a lot of what goes on behind the closed doors in the centres of power here spills out as blood pumped into the rain-filled gutters. Local merchants swindle the people they live among. Neighbours sling insults at each other over tall wooden fences. Pirates swagger down the street and look to start a rum-fueled brawl, but are set upon in dark alleys, stabbed and robbed by callous street urchins, grim-faced and hard-hearted, the youth beaten out of them by the school of the streets. Harlots expose themselves to anyone they think may have some spare coin, and spit vile insults at the backs of the strangers who ignore them and walk on by. This is an urban wilderness, just as full of monsters as any dark and evil dungeon for the unwary. Sweat, spit, blood and waste permeates the tired soil long hidden away from the sun and the air. But along with this, something of the pervading mood of this place soaks down into the earth as well. In cellars and basements, sewers and drains, vermin grow fat and vigorous on the constant trickle of muck, and the aggression, despair and lies seem to pool up and spark the seed of evil. What started possibly as something as simple as an ordinary creature of tiny size, the False Hydra takes on an unnatural hunger, gorging itself on earthworms, has grown into a misshapen mass of fleshy stuff, growing even ever larger on the evil and villainy that it soaks up like a sponge. It wiggles and twitches as it burrows and rises closer and closer to the surface, and then, one night, it emerges in some low and dark place. Perhaps a sewer, perhaps a basement, some awful pit out the back of a butcher's or fishmonger's. What it is has only a few traits left of what it once was. It is pale, almost boneless, clammy, and every part of it seems to move. It's little more than the size of a human torso, and from the top, pushing out of the mucked dirt, a long, flexible neck, topped with a totally hairless head, with fleshy lips and a fattened brow over dark, wet holes where its eyes should be. When it opens that slimy gash of a mouth, it begins to sing. The song has a potent effect on any who hear it. They simply cannot focus on it at all. It serves to infiltrate the brain and provoke it to betray the body. So even those who walk right next to the False Hydra could no doubt see it if only they were able to pay attention and actually look. But that song twists and turns the mind, allowing the monstrous creature to hide perfectly well, even in plain sight. What may soon become noticed, though, is the vanishing people, as the False Hydra no longer eats just earthworms and stray pets. It eats whole people. In order to feed on someone, the Hydra has to stop singing, and at this point, the attention of those around it can now focus on the loathsome thing and raise the alarm. So to protect itself better, the False Hydra waits until the best possible moment to strike, and will quickly drag its victim down under the ground, into a basement or sewer if it can, or a pit or cellar if it must. The song of the creature is like a tension headache. It is present, ever present and vaguely felt, but only noticed when it suddenly stops. The person who is going about their business taking a sack of turnips down to the cellar storage, walks to the back of the dimly illuminated chamber, only suddenly to notice a stark silence, as if something loud just ceased, but they don't know what it was. Then, small sounds they couldn't hear before become clear, even to their ears, a scratch of some misshapen limb, a heavy breath, the sound of something squeezing through an opening or crack or hole in the floor, pushing aside a squeaking plank of wood. The person spins around suddenly as the light in the room changes, just as a nightmare head, too fleshy and with teeth far too large, lunges forward on a grossly elongated neck, and those teeth bite down with ferocious hunger, slicing into and gripping bleeding flesh as the screaming victim is then relentlessly dragged and yanked through the tight space, the bones snapping and limbs vanishing from sight. No trace but a splash of blood across the cellar floor. Nearby, the curious silence lasts for a short time and then resumes the song, the False Hydra having consumed its meal. The supernatural power of the False Hydra digests not just the flesh and bone, but also the mind of the victim. It savors the brain almost like a mind flare, and with its knowledge of the victim's memory and identity, it alters its song so that those who knew and were known to the victim, who would care most about their death, are now unlikely to even notice the victim's absence. Their memory of that person becomes quite vague, as though the False Hydra not only eats the body, but also consumes the very identity and existence of the victim, as though they had never even been. Meanwhile, the False Hydra grows larger, stronger. Its song affects a larger area and with less of the paranoia and confusion that people felt at first. Eventually, the people in the area will start to create their own explanations for strange gaps left by the people who the False Hydra has eaten. They will rationalize and make excuses, draw incorrect conclusions, and actively seem to avoid even the chance that they must confront these very disturbing anomalies in their day-to-day and very personal lives. Where is your husband? He went away to war. What war? The one in a faraway place. And so on. This confusing force can lead to insanity within those left in close proximity to the creature for extended periods of time, as the conflicting reality of the situation causes their mind to spiral into paranoid delusion and eventually psychosis. Arnold Kemp conveys this perfectly well as he suggests ways to include this madness in the game, and I quote, "In severe cases, split brain occurs where one part of the brain strives to communicate with the other. One of the PC's limbs might suddenly become its own entity, one that crudely and violently struggles to convey the danger to the player character. A player character might wake up and discover that someone has scratched 'It's watching you right now' the window on their chest, and there is skin beneath their fingernails on their left hand. Great. If they have received a distressed letter from their mother wanting to know why the last letter the player character sent contained the sentence, 'It ate him in front of me, but I did not see it ate him,' inserted in the middle. Great. If they decide that their hand is possessed by demons and cut it off, best of all. This could also be the hook for the player characters. An acquaintance sends them an innocuous letter that somehow contains the phrase, 'Help me, for the love of God, help me.' When they get there, the acquaintance has no memory of writing it, but looks nervous and a little bit insane, or claiming that it's probably just some wizard's prank. 'And where is your wife?' 'Why, I never married.' 'Why would you joke about this?' And the next day, tell the players that the player characters have forgotten about the wife as well. You can't get rid of the metagame knowledge in their heads, but allow them to act on the metagame knowledge when they can roleplay these intense feelings of paranoia or distress. Their dreams are filled with dirges spilled from the mouths of faceless people, and somewhere a pale face whose eyes are nothing but wet black holes. The False Hydra gets its name from the additional heads it grows as it matures, as it hunts and feeds by use of that extended neck and the ability to snake its head through openings, singing that droning song until it strikes. The more heads it has, and the longer its necks become, the more able it is to hunt and slake its ever-present hunger. It soon becomes so large it needs to consume several people every day, and in doing so invariably becomes harder to conceal and more careless in its habits. The song of the False Hydra is a form of potent suggestion and enchantment rather than invisibility. Some folk tales tell about how cats can still see them, or you can glance them through the reflection of a mirror. Some say that puddles of water that appear without reason might be pools of blood, and one need only take a sample far away from the town to confirm that it will indeed turn from water to blood. away from the evil predator's influence. Unfortunately, the easiest way to catch the False Hydra requires sacrificing victims to it, as it pauses its song to feed, revealing itself to those who are actively hunting it. If the creature matures to the point it has grown 7 heads, it changes its song to one of outright domination, drops its concealment, and simply orders anyone left to hunt down and bring it more food. Its voice is speaking as one in booming tones, in whatever language it is most common in the area. It will eventually realize that it needs to seek a new hunting ground and order its minions to dig it up out of the ground, heave it up and carry it en masse to a new location. However, even as it travels, it eats those who it has dominated and will rarely make it to a new location, arriving like some nightmare poorly concealed, dragged with ropes and chains, covered in blood and gore. What happens in the later stage of the creature's life is entirely up to you. Does it think it's some sort of a god? Do several of them spring up at once and collude with each other? Does it decide to become a mobile enemy at some earlier stage, perhaps stowing itself within the hold of a ship, using an enslaved crew to chase down other ships, and when the two vessels clash, their heads extrude and begin to feed in a mad frenzy? The homebrew stats for the creature presented are a huge False Hydra, a chaotic evil aberration with an armor class of 10 and 20 d10 plus 100 for an average of 210 hit points. It is ponderous, with a speed of only 5 feet per round, if any. It also has no particular resistance to damage, other than being immune to any charm effects. It has blind sight out to 120 feet and a passive perception of 14. Notably, it also has lots of bonuses to intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. Very high bonuses to skills such as deception, persuasion, intimidation, and insight. It has a strength of 20, constitution of 20, intelligence of 21, charisma of 24, and wisdom of 19. As a legendary creature, it has legendary resistance 3 times per day, where it can simply choose to automatically succeed on any saving throw. It has an arcane knowledge it gleans from its victims, but even without any extra spell powers, it can innately cast Detect Thoughts at will, and 3 times per day it can cast Dominate Monster, using its intelligence for a spell save difficulty class of 18. As mentioned, the False Hydra sings a harrowing melody, which is heard by anyone within 5 miles of the head that sings. Only one head needs to sing, and having additional heads join the song provides no benefits. Creature hearing the song gain gaps in their memory that have no recollection of. If a person enters a room with a False Hydra, the song may cause the person to forget the Hydra was there. This is commonly used to cause people who are closest to the victims of the Hydra to forget the person existed. The song does not alter reality, only perception. A woman who lost her husband may find it confusing to find a man's clothes in her house, as she recalls no husband. This effect doesn't work on people who are deaf, of course, or are focused on the item the gap is intended to replace. For example, the woman above may witness the Hydra eating a man and recall all of it during the event, but forget the second she looks away, so dashing from an alleyway screaming, and then all of a sudden her face goes blank and she looks confused as to why her throat is raw. As people are victims to the mind song, they risk gaining split minds. If a victim gains split mind, the left half of the mind separates from the right. The victim will not notice this. However, the left half cannot hear, thus is immune to the mind song, but it can see. It may try to notify the victim of the Hydra, but only controls half the body. It does not control speech. This may appear as the left hand inserting text into a note the victim is writing, or scratching letters on the chest as they sleep. Since the right brain is still impacted by the mind song, they never notice the letter. However, the scars on the chest are harder to blank out of the mind. As the False Hydra grows, it gains additional heads, and the length of its neck increases to a sickening degree, acting more like tentacles with heads on the end of them. Consult the link below for details on how long the necks are, how many the False Hydra has at each growth stage, and how likely it is to grow more heads depending on its feeding rate. It's a very well-designed mechanic for this monster. It's very impressive, and I think could apply to lots of other homebrew monsters, so well worth a look. With more heads come more physical attacks, with each head providing a bite attack action each round. Plus, the False Hydra as a legendary creature has 3 additional legendary actions it takes during the round only at the end of another creature's turn. The False Hydra regains spent legendary actions at the start of its turn and can either make another bite attack or release a sonic pulse. The False Hydra targets a creature within range of its heads and blasts it with a cone of noise. Creatures within 10 feet of the cone take 46 sonic damage. This is a lesser version of its full-on sonic attack. The ferocious bite of each head is plus 11 to hit one target, doing 4d8 plus 2 damage, either bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing depending on how it attacks with its head. If the target is a huge or smaller creature, it is grappled, escape DC is 15, and takes 1d8 plus 5 bludgeoning constriction damage at the start of each of its turns until the grapple ends. The False Hydra can grapple one creature per head at a time. A grappled creature can also be targeted by the False Hydra's engulfing attack. The False Hydra engulfs a large or smaller creature grappled by it. The engulfed target is blinded, restrained, and unable to breathe, and it must succeed on a DC 25 Constitution saving throw at the start of each of the False Hydra's turns, or take 1d8 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. If the False Hydra's head moves or its body moves, the engulfed target moves with it, of course. The False Hydra can only have one creature engulfed at a time. If the target's hit points drop to 0 while engulfed at any time, it is immediately consumed, the body torn apart and swallowed in big, meaty, blood-spurting chunks. Finally, the False Hydra can release that sonic blast on its turn. Once used, it must be recharged with a roll at the start of the creature's turn with a 1d6, recharging a result of 5 or 6. With the blast, the False Hydra lets out a vicious scream. Creatures within 60 feet of it must succeed on a DC 20 Constitution saving throw or take 5d10 plus 5 sonic damage and be stunned for 1 round. If they succeed on the Constitution saving throw, they are not stunned and will only take half damage from the attack. I'll leave it up to you whether creatures outside of the creature's song range can actually hear the sonic screech and wonder where it's coming from or what it is. Right, so Lair actions and the regional effects to round out this horror. When fighting inside its lair, a False Hydra can use Lair actions. On initiative count 20, losing initiative ties. A false creature can take one False Hydra can take one Lair action to cause one of the following effects. The False Hydra can't use the same Lair action 2 rounds in a row. It can cast Dominate Monster, or the False Hydra targets one dominated creature it can sense within 120 feet of it. The target has a flash of inspiration and gains advantage on one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes before the end of its next turn. If the target doesn't or can't use this benefit in that time, the inspiration is lost. It will typically use this on a dominated creature, of course. The False Hydra can also target one creature it can sense within 120 feet of it and cause it to freeze with fear by sheer force of its will. The target must succeed on a DC 18 Charisma saving throw or be unable to leave its current space. It can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. You can imagine what this would be like if it doesn't know what the cause of this is. It's just frozen on the spot in terror of it doesn't know what. Regional effects for the False Hydra are invariably within a populated town or city, so the city a False Hydra feeds on will experience one of the following effects. Creatures within 5 miles of the False Hydra can hear its mind song. The mind song works as the ability. Only one head needs to be singing for its effect to take notice, but it always ceases singing when it's eating. If the False Hydra dies, this effect immediately ends and the lost memory is not restored. It simply never formed a memory in the first place. An excellent monster, just the thing for an urban horror investigation. It has all the hallmarks of a very good Call of Cthulhu sort of game, where the players know that something terrible is going on, and it's going to be really nasty when they find out what it is, but they can't stop trying to get to the bottom of this terrible mystery they've discovered. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do. Check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. Check out the membership for this channel and the perks therein. Buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.